This is a seismic, prophetic time that we have a front row seat on.
Yep.
And it's also interesting to see the sheer bankruptcy of Russia, Turkey, Iran, and how they need to form a coalition. Mm-hmm. Their mutual eyeing out the resources of Israel in such a small strip of land with concentrated resources, their insatiable appetite to rescue themselves with a joint interest in what would seemingly be just a small territory of land is now of great interest. And then you add hatred on top of that and all of the Kool-Aid of lies that they've been drinking. We have the perfect platform right now for an invasion.
I do believe that they are setting the stage for that peace that precedes the Ezekiel war.
If we see a peace plan in Ukraine and Russia, I will be jumping up and down and doing cartwheels because it increases the likelihood of an invasion, let's say within, I'm just throwing out a random number here, 5 to 10 years. It makes the possibility of that happening much, much higher if we see a peace deal go through and we see a recovery period for Russia running in parallel to Israel's peace and safety in the Middle East. In today's video, Ukraine and Russia peace plan, the Ezekiel 38 war, the destruction of Damascus, and more. All right. Hello, everybody. I hope you're having an amazing week so far. Some exciting talks happening over the last week or so in regards to a Ukraine and Russia peace plan. And with all of these talks about a possible Ukraine and Russia deal, I wanted to share a couple of clips from Amir Tsarfati. The first clip is from about a year ago, but there are some really, really nice thoughts in there in terms of Trump, Russia, Damascus, and the Ezekiel 38 war. That first clip is about 20 minutes long. And then after that 20-minute clip, I'll be sharing a shorter 5-minute clip from Amir's live update yesterday, where him and Pastor Barry briefly touch on Trump, Russia, Damascus, and the Ezekiel 38 war. So make sure you stick around for all of that. And then right at the end, after those clips, I'll be sharing a couple of numbers with you in regards to Russia and just some of my own thoughts in terms of this Ukraine and Russia peace deal. Links to the full videos can be found in the description for those of you who would like to check those out. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let's take a listen.
We can all agree that we live in amazing times. I mean, prophetic, of course, but, biblical events happen right before our very eyes. If you asked me a year and 2 months ago that a year and 2 months later, Israel is going to find itself with its biggest enemies completely wiped out of the map and with opportunities like never before for prosperity, relatively peace, and expansion of the normalization agreements. And if you would tell me a year and 2 months ago that President Trump is going to win a landslide victory, both with the popular vote, the electoral vote, both houses and Supreme Court, if you would tell me all these things a year and 2 months ago, I would probably say that I want to buy that thing which you're eating, drinking, or whatever, because, you know exactly how we here in Israel felt a year and 2 months ago, almost 3 months ago. And so, guys, my thing is, I have no words. I'm speechless at how God intervened in ways that are above and beyond human ability. But I'm going to start with you, Jan, and then Pastor Barry, if you can also chip in. What is it that you think, of all the things that have happened in the recent months, What is the prophetic landscape that you believe that we're having as we head into 2025?
Well, Amir, I'm not so sure that the Bible has a verse about, business as usual, but I find the mindset of most people, certainly Americans, is, oh, now we're going back to business as usual. This peace is breaking out all over, which you've just suggested. I think that we're going to see as a result, what I'm talking about, a setup for the coming false peace. Believers aren't going to see that, but we're going to keep seeing the setup for Revelation 13. We can't stop the rush to Revelation 13. I mean, that is, I think, the primary thing that's going on. And the biggest obstacle to its fulfillment is the church is still here.
Mm-hmm. I see. Pastor Barry, if you could put your finger on a single most important event that is taking us into 2025 and is very prophetic, what would you say?
Well, as you were talking, Amir, I couldn't help but think, in this window of 14 months, the world has changed. And this is completely consistent with what Jesus said when he mentioned in Matthew 24:3-8, that there would be a birth pang-like progression and that things closer to the end of the church age, that is, would increase in their frequency and intensity exponentially. And I think that's what we're seeing, this move toward, as Jan mentioned, this global system of governance. We have a season of hope here in the United States brought about, and there's an equal side or near equal side who are in great despair. So we're seeing the polarization of the world. I think that's necessary for the tribulation period to happen, for the man of sin to rise to power, and all the other things that we're not going to see, but that are going to come upon the whole world. But one of the things I think that would be primary, Amir, in watching things develop around the world outside of what's happening in Israel and the Middle East itself, is that this sudden surge of interest in the Bible and religion. And, I say that in that format because there's a difference in having an interest in knowing God and having a personal relationship with Jesus and finding the Bible to be an interesting book and religion to be something worthy of pursuit. And really, that's what we've been seeing with these very well-known gentlemen, especially of late, and one other who have moved into the realm of religion and are promoting it around the world, doing things about podcasts about the Bible and the Sermon on the Mount and these other things, and looking at it from a very analytical and philosophical perspective. And I think to some degree, there's a risk of missing the personal and intimate aspect of knowing Jesus personally as Savior and Lord, and rather just having a relationship with religion. So I think that's preparatory in what's going to come after we're gone, and there will be this religious element that is of the first and second beast empire that were there. I think there's a fascination with it already right now.
Jan, do you think that the victory of Donald Trump serves as a thing by itself for the American people, or do you see it also as something that God has allowed in order to achieve things on the other side of the globe, in the Middle East, and in particular with Israel?
Absolutely. I think that the key with Donald Trump's re-election is probably his relationship with Israel. But I just want to make a statement here as an American and as a warning, particularly to those who are praying and who are prayers. The deep state is not going away. The evil of the deep state is not going away. As a matter of fact, I think they'll ramp up a whole lot to try to push back on his agenda. And again, I think even though there's a mentality of we're going back to normal, so to speak, business as usual, so to speak, here's my concern, Amir, based on what we've already said here for the last few minutes, and that is Christians are going to go back to sleep as usual. And we can't do that at this point in time. I mean, we're looking at, again, as you can speak to better than anybody, potential conflict in the Middle. We've got peace all over the place, but we never have peace in the Middle East. And I think that is probably one of the big reasons God allowed Donald Trump to get reelected is his Middle East policy, which isn't perfect, but it's a whole lot better than anything we have seen in recent years. And you are more apprised than anybody as to some of the things that are coming up that Israel is going to face in light of the Bible, not the least of which is Russia stirring everything up to the point where she's going to eventually come and invade. Not now. We don't know when, but I think that's on the table.
Yeah. Barry, what do you say about the election of Donald Trump? It's one of the biggest events of the last couple of months. No one can deny that. And of course, it is already sending ripple effects all throughout the globe, even here in the Middle East. How do you see that particular event affecting the world as a prophetic thing as we usher into 2025?
Well, I think it's probably going to push forward the polarization of the world, as some countries are excited about it, and Israel being among them. Other countries are not so happy about it because he is anti-globalism. And the interesting thing I think that Jan just pointed out is, this idea that everything's okay, so we can pull back and just rest easy. And I think we're living in a different world now. And, the murder of the CEO of United Healthcare, I think is a bit of a tell as to what's happening with the mindset of many people today. And that is, I think it's all in preparation for the man of sin to rise to power and for the earth dwellers to side with him in the execution of those who don't receive the mark. Because now you've got a mentality, as we saw with Trump and the 2 assassination attempts, that, if you don't like what somebody stands for, just take them out. And I think this has to be something that is moving forward prior to the tribulation period that will reach its zenith during that time. So I think it's very definitely something that is globally impacting, the stances of different countries. And I think, even some of the comments from Putin were rather interesting, as we got kind of a mixed message initially out of his Russia regarding his response. But he's recently even come out and said, I think Trump can do something about the Ukraine situation. So, he's had an impact all around the world, even in some of the big stories that we've all been following for the past couple of years. Yeah. But, man, I have to say, Amir and Jan and Mike, I think we are so close. I love what Jan has signed off many of her emails with perhaps today. And I think perhaps today is more relevant than it ever has been before, that we could go and be with the Lord.
Amen.
Amen.
I personally, I also believe that in order for Russia to get busy with its next step, which is us, they need to get done with what they're busy now with, which hinders them from being able to function well. And this is one of the reasons why Bashar al-Assad so quickly fell. It's because Russia was too busy, couldn't defend him, couldn't help him. And the Russians basically said, if the Syrian army is not going to defend its own president, why would we do that? Russia couldn't afford spending more people, more soldiers, more forces, because Russia is stretched too tight and too far, and the Ukraine campaign is costing them so much. So I do believe that even in that area alone, the election of President Trump and the fact that it is already sending signals that the war in Ukraine is about to come to an end, it's also an interesting thing. I also believe, by the way, that Israel is finding itself in a situation right now that is, we've never been stronger, we've never been more powerful. Look, after such a long time of war, our economy is resilient. Our currency is one of the strongest in the world. Our surplus is unbelievable. Foreign currency surplus is through the roof. And more than that, we are now doing things in the Middle East that we were hoping, praying, dreaming to do for the last 76 years, and we couldn't. And now we're doing them on daily basis, and the world says nothing. I mean, even the Arab world says nothing. Even the country that we are doing it to says nothing. That alone tells you that there has been a great shift towards Israel becoming safe, secure, and prosperous, which is the precondition for a big war led by Russia. So I mean, I'm looking at all of this. Look, I'm amazed. Every morning in the last few weeks when I wake up, I have to pinch myself before I report news of events that, weeks ago would be making headlines all over the world, and today they're not even mentioned anymore because it's being done. I mean, just last night, we bombed underground facilities of Assad that created an earthquake, a 3.0 magnitude earthquake in northern Syria because of what we did there. And most media outlets never even mentioned that. And we are eliminating military capabilities of the military that was the nightmare of the IDF over the last 75 years. When I was in the military service in the early 1990s, everything we practiced on was the model of the Syrian army. The Syrian army was the biggest force that we had to deal with. Not only that they had ballistic missiles, but strategic weapons such as chemical and biological. The chemical and biological weapon we were actually trained to defend ourselves from is a Syrian thing. And so here we are, 2024 is about to come to an end, and 90% of Syria's capabilities were taken from it already, and we're still working the last 10%. So in my mind, we're entering into 2025 stronger than when we finished the 6 Days War, and with more power than even throughout the 2000s when we bloomed and prospered in an unbelievable way. Now, all of that is not to boast. All of that it actually doesn't make sense, even if you really think about it. If it wasn't for God, and if it's not for the fact that things have to happen, they have to happen. God knew they're going to happen. So I'm quite encouraged to see all of that. But I also agree with all of you that we're going to see surge in religion and surge in trying to figure things out, also in the supernatural way. And it's not necessarily running towards Jesus. It's maybe running towards Jesus's supplement or some things that are even a replacement for that. Mike, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, this is a seismic, prophetic time that we have a front row seat on.
Yep.
And it's also interesting to see the sheer bankruptcy of Russia, Turkey, Iran, and how they need to form a coalition. Mm-hmm. Their mutual eyeing out the resources of Israel in such a small strip of land with concentrated resources, their insatiable appetite to rescue themselves with a joint interest in what would seemingly be just a small territory of land is now of great interest. And then you add hatred on top of that and all of the Kool-Aid of lies that they've been drinking. We have the perfect platform right now for an invasion. When, I don't know. How, I don't know. But Israel is comfortable in the land. All of the ingredients to bake this prophetic cake are in place. And myself, for one, I'm feeling privileged that I have a front row seat to all of this going down, Amir.
We see Europe in chaos right now. How do you see that? How do you see that in prophecy as we usher into 2025?
Well, when you have policies that are loosey-goosey and you let anybody and anybody into your country and give them power, and then you look at the world theater of what you can do if you exert force. You know, the rebels literally took over the country in days of Syria. Now you have Holland, and you have Germany, you have UK, France, all of these countries, which the Bible does speak about the Antichrist coming out of. Mm-hmm. The only way an Antichrist can come out of a place is if it is in need, if it is in chaos, where someone that has strong leadership skills that in some miraculous way can bend people's minds to have them believe in him, such an environment is, to your point, exactly what is going on. People are wondering, who should we follow? What is this future that we all want to look like? Nationalism's dying, identity's dying. Some people polarize and say we need our national identity back. And I'd say it's too late, because look at the framework and the fabric and the population and the people that have already influenced change and made a lot of these countries into something that it is not. Now, Europe, I think, if you're asking my opinion, is on the cusp of need and desperation for a leader that will impact their economy, their politics, their social environment, their education, somebody they can trust in that will bring peace and stability and security. That's the environment that's happening. It's like a harbinger of what's to come in terms of birthing some kind of leader.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Amir, can I throw
please.
some in here?
Yeah.
We talked about this on the Q&A last week, and I think it's worth revisiting just for a minute. That the potential progression of events at this point in time could be the destruction of Damascus. And after that happens, the Ezekiel war could be, the hook could be put in the jaw of these nations drawn down from the north. And then, as we talked about last week on the Q&A, I think the church has to be taken out of the way before the end of the Ezekiel war, because it's something that God does specifically on behalf of the nation of Israel, which seems to be more consistent with the events outside the church age rather than during the church age. And I think the point we need to recognize is that I think it's possible that the progression of events could be the destruction of Damascus, the beginning of the Ezekiel war, the rapture of the church, the end of the Ezekiel war, and then the tribulation begins. I don't think the Ezekiel war has to end during the tribulation. I think the Ezekiel war could very well be the catalyst for this guy to rise up right onto the world scene with a covenant in hand and make that which was prophesied in Daniel 9 with the nation of Israel and many other nations in tow. So I think just Syria is so crucial to this whole scenario, I believe. And I think, as both Mike and Jan pointed out, we are very, very close to seeing that happen.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I also believe that radical Islam has to be so defeated that the Antichrist can finally offer a third temple on the Temple Mount. Because, when Islam is still in power, it won't happen, and you know that. But when it's crushed, then the possibility of having a temple on Temple Mount is back on the table, and that will make the Jewish people very, very happy.
Okay, so some very interesting thoughts there. And what I also think is interesting is just consider that this was recorded about a year ago. So if you think about everything that's happened over the last year and you listen to them speaking a year ago, I think it's really interesting to consider how things have unfolded since they recorded this. Very interesting. All right, and then moving on to this last clip from Amir Tsarfati. This is from Amir's live update yesterday. Let's take a listen.
Given the progress Trump is making with the peace deals, how close do you think we are to the destruction of Damascus?
When it comes to Trump's peace deals, I do believe that they are setting the stage for that peace that precedes the Ezekiel war. But I also believe that the Ezekiel war should be somehow a result of an event such as the destruction of Damascus that will cause such an uproar and blame on Israel maybe, and they'll move forward. So I don't think necessarily the peace deals and the destruction of Damascus are related, but I do believe that the peace deals could only precede the Damascus destruction and not follow it, because I believe that in order for the Ezekiel war to start, we first need to be safe, secure, prosperous, with unwalled villages and all of that. And in order for the Ezekiel war to start, you need something big. And so when you know that Damascus has to be destroyed, and when you know that Ezekiel war has to start, where will you put the Damascus destruction necessarily? And the only thing that makes sense to me is that first comes this peace, then comes the destruction of Damascus, which will lead to the Ezekiel war. But again, it's a speculation. The Bible doesn't tell us Damascus will fall before Ezekiel's war. We don't have that, but we can use common sense and put one and one when we see world events. So that's how I see things. I don't see direct correlation between the two, but I do see that, one will have to follow another.
Yeah, it's a big question. We get it asked a lot. It's the chronology. Pastor Bray, what's your view on that? Where does it stand in terms of the chronology and your understanding?
Yeah, I think like Amir said, we have to apply some basic logic, and it's what we might call a standalone prophecy. It's just Isaiah 17:1, boom, Damascus will become a ruinous heap and cease from being a city. Now, what that I think tells us in observing what we're looking at today is that, in a sense, from the transition from Bashar al-Assad until to al-Jilani, it's kind of a jumping from the frying pan into the fire. I'll get my metaphor straight here in a moment. But, here you've got someone who put on the business suit, and but underneath that is the garb of a jihadist. And so who knows what the catalyst is going to be. But just as the destruction of Damascus seems to be a probability to launch the Ezekiel war, so too, I think there'll be a catalyst for the destruction of Damascus. Something's going to happen. The Iranians are going to get some type of nuclear device within proximity of Israel, 40 miles from the Golan border, and Israel's going to take them out. I think is kind of, again, just a logical conclusion. But I see things as the same way. I think what's really going to push the invasion from the north of the five invading nations that recorded in Ezekiel is going to be the destruction of Damascus. But we don't know, and but it sure seems like all the players are in the news almost every day who are going to be involved in these scenarios. So I think that's a logical conclusion.
And then just to finish off here, in regards to the Ukraine and Russia peace plan and how that relates to the Ezekiel 38 war, I just wanted to share some of the numbers here in terms of Russia's losses throughout this war. So at the very top here, we've got over 1 million troops dead, almost 1.2 million troops dead, 23,000 AFVs, 68,000 vehicles, 11,000 tanks. So these are all losses, by the way. 34,000 artillery systems, 83,000 drones, and more. So you can read the rest of those for yourself. And my point in sharing these losses is I think it does make sense that there would be a bit of a recovery period for Russia before this evil plan comes into play when they invade Israel, okay, in the Ezekiel 38 war. So if we see a peace plan in Ukraine and Russia, I will be jumping up and down and doing cartwheels, because it increases the likelihood of an invasion, let's say within, I'm just throwing out a random number here, 5 to 10 years. It makes the possibility of that happening much, much higher if we see a peace deal go through and we see a recovery period for Russia running in parallel to Israel's peace and safety in the Middle East. So a couple of videos ago, I mentioned that it could take, I throw out numbers just in relation to things we've seen in the past. So I said it could take about 2 years to see things in the Middle East now cool down. So things in Gaza cool down, possibly Israel going in and finishing off Hamas. Okay. Then we've got the Hezbollah story, and then we've got Yemen. So these areas need to cool down first, because none of them are involved in the Ezekiel 38 war. It makes complete sense that they would be completely sort of neutralized and unable to join in that war when it eventually happens, the Ezekiel 38 war. So I'd say 2 years for the kind of Israel safety to kind of really sort of start, and we move into that peace and safety era for Israel. And then in parallel, if we have Ukraine and Russia, a peace plan, and then in parallel, Russia's recovery running with Israel's peace and safety. And then eventually we get to this moment where Gog comes up with this evil plan to move south towards Israel and invade Israel. But just finally on this deal overall, I think based on Russia's losses, Putin would really need a sweet deal to stop. You'd need to feel like these losses were worth it in one way or another. So I suppose we'll see how that plays out. But ultimately, if this peace plan does happen, you can start getting really excited, because I would say we are very, very close to moving through this era of peace and safety for Israel. And then eventually, this accumulation of events against Russia and things like that, or something big happens to Russia that forces them down to Israel. If this peace plan happens, you can start getting really excited, because I think we will be just right there, right there. But I must also mention, from my perspective, when reading the text in Ezekiel, when God says, I will turn you around and put hooks in your jaws, to me, that also makes it sound like Gog, so Russia, is busy with something at the time, and then God turns them around and brings them down to Israel. So the text to me also makes it sound like Russia could still be busy with Ukraine, and then something happens to turn Russia away from Ukraine and bring them down to Israel. That's just an alternative perspective I wanted to add here, is that, we can't say for sure that a peace deal with Russia and Ukraine is absolutely necessary. We can't say that for sure. But I would say I would prefer to see a peace deal and know that there is a recovery period for Russia before they go into this this invasion against Israel. It just seems like the most likely option. But overall, very interesting to watch it unfold. And yes, I'm going to be keeping an eye on this peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. And if it goes through, you can start jumping and doing cartwheels, guys, because we are right there, right there to watching this unfold. And whether the rapture happens just before the war or during or after, I don't know. But I think they're very close together. And yeah, just get excited. Anyway, I'm rambling now, so I'm going to stop here. I hope you enjoyed everything that I shared with you today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. God bless, and I will chat to you later.